Hello, class. All right, so at this point, we've covered quite a few uh, things from variables to if statements. Now we're going to cover switch statements, which is pretty much just like ifs, except it has a few different perks and a little bit different setup. You can almost use the ifs and switches interchangeably for some things. It depends. Ifs are used more, but there are a lot of cases where switches are just better. So that depends on where you want to use it. It does look more organized. It looks nicer, I think, but it's entirely up to you whether you prefer to use it or not. NetBeans and Java itself prefers switches if you have a lot of different things that could possibly happen, but let's give this a try. So again, put the date, underscore whatever, you know, whatever the date is, and I'm just going to call this intro switches. And make sure you're saved in the right place, and voila. So first let's talk about ifs, and then we're going to compare them to the switch. So first and foremost, setting up my, there we go, boom. And again, mark these. The more braces we have, the honestly better this is. I'm going to tell you ahead of time, most programming classes, teachers don't tell you to do that. Uh, I found when I first started teaching that braces were probably the number one problem for most people. And I told them to start marking them. And the problems went down dramatically after that. So do it. It will save yourself hours and hours of time in the future. So first and foremost, let's talk about your basic if. I'm going to have just a variable here. Let's just go with 2. We'll make this pretty simple. If you remember, if number equals 0, else if number equals 1, and then else. This is an if. And I could print various things inside. I'm going to cap 1. I'm going to cap all of them, actually. Uh, or not. There we go. So I have a possibility of one of these things happening. More than one thing cannot happen. It doesn't matter if I come in here and I say, number equals 1 inside this. Uh, this if will run, number will change to 1 if this happens, and none of these others will run regardless. It just depends. Of course, since I have this set to 2, we know that that's going to run the else. It's not 0, it's not 1. The only other option is this. Now, as mentioned before, notice that this says convert ifs to switch statement. So we're going to talk about a switch statement here. You can have Java automatically convert it. There it goes. And it'll convert it to a switch, so you can kind of see what that looks like. This is the if statement, basically the same thing that I just wrote. So in switch, let's talk about this. And if you wanted to keep the other one, you can pause and just write this underneath it, but I'm about to write it out anyway. Basically, this is switch. This is what this starts with, switch, and then whatever variable we're going to use. Case 0 basically says if number equals 0. Do whatever lines are here. Now break is used to tell it to leave. If you notice, there are no braces anywhere. In a regular if statement, the brace tells the program when we're done with whatever code we're working on. If I don't have this break statement and this is 0, it'll run everything. So the break is just to break out of this brace. Break will take me here. Break's very useful for breaking out of ifs. You can break out of loops and other things, but at the end of each case, we're going to use that. This right here would basically be the same as if number is 1. And default is your else. So if it's not any of those, or not, it's going to be that one. Now, I'm just going to, well, that's probably not the most efficient way to do that. I was going to undo and copy and paste the if so you can see it, but number equals 0. I can just go ahead and rewrite it. It doesn't take but a second. Else if number equals 1, else. And then I can just kind of copy and paste. Because copy and paste is very, very useful. You don't need the breaks for the if, but this is the comparison. These two do exactly the same thing. Now, as I said before, let's see here. Oh, there we go. Or not, or not. If I change this number to 1, you'll see they both work the exact same way. So here's the thing. You'll notice that NetBeans wants to convert all these ifs, especially at least if you have if, else's, like this structure here, to switches. And the reason for that is it's more efficient. Now, how an if works, it checks the first condition. If that's false, it'll go to the next one, check it. If that's false, it'll go to the next one. If that's false, it'll go to the next one, and I can have as many of these else ifs as I want, 20 of them if I feel like it. And if all of these fail, it'll go to the else. So it's going to go down this list, this chart basically, and check them off one at a time. Now, a switch case doesn't do that. So if my number is 1, it'll go directly to case 1 and run that code. It's not going to do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If it was 10, it would go directly to 10 if that was there. Now, if it's not one of the listed cases, it would immediately go to default. So you can see how it's a little more efficient to do a switch case instead of let's say I had 100 different things to go through. For a computer, that takes, milliseconds. You won't notice it at all. It goes through 100, thousands of different cases. A switch case, if you ran them side by side and timed them, is going to be faster. Now, again, milliseconds, the human brain eye wouldn't notice. But let's say you had to do this particular calculation, you know, thousands of times a second for certain things that are going on. Well, that little fraction of a second of wait is going to add up. And this is where you get like heavy lag time in programs or games or something like that, if someone codes it inefficiently like that. Now, of course, you can't use this for everything, but you can use this for numbers. You can use it for strings. Actually, I would argue strings is much easier than in switch case than it is for ifs. Uh, if I have to use a string, honestly, a switch case is just easier to write instead of doing it this way. Because you have to do something slightly different for the ifs, whereas the switch case kind of automatically has it done for you. We'll get to that later. But either way, you know, both of these do the same thing. Whichever you prefer, it really doesn't matter for the programs we're writing. Just know the difference. Know how to write both. In fact, it's a good practice to, you know, write it one way and then convert it to another. It's one of the common things I have people do in class. I'll write an if and say, okay, convert it to a switch, or vice versa. Uh, Once you know they do exactly the same thing, then depends on your program, what you want to do. As I said, this looks a lot more organized. Case 0, case 1, 2, 3, as opposed to all these ifs that you see here. It's a little longer, but it looks better organized, at least to me. All right, that is your introduction to a quick switch case. And as I said, whatever you want to use in your program, do it. Sometimes it's just better to use one or the other. Other times it doesn't matter. Use your best judgment.